The Yom Kippur War. With sophisticated Soviet weapons, the Arabs were overwhelming the Israelis, who were pleading in Washington for an immediate emergency airlift of arms. That same night, after a long meeting, President Nixon decided to send U.S. aid to Israel. It was a major decision that countered grave Russian threats.
President, I'd like to ask you a question about the Mideast. To what extent do you think your Watergate troubles influenced Soviet thinking about your ability to respond in the Mideast? And did your Watergate problems convince you that the U.S. needed a strong response in the Mideast to convince other nations that you have not been weakened?
Well, I've noted speculation to the effect that the Watergate problems may have led the Soviet Union to miscalculate. I tend to disagree with that, however. I think Mr. Brezhnev probably can't quite understand how the President of the United States wouldn't be able to handle the Watergate problems. He'd be able to handle it all right if he had them.
A lot of people have been wondering how you are bearing up emotionally under the stress of recent events. Could you discuss that?
Well, those who saw me during the Middle East crisis thought I bore up rather well. And, Mr. Torres, I have a quality which I guess I must have inherited it from my Midwestern mother and father, which is that the tougher it gets, the cooler I get.
What is it about the television coverage of you in these past weeks and months that has so aroused your anger?
Don't get the impression that you arouse my anger. You see,
I have that impression.
You see, one can only be angry with those he respects.
Mr. President.
By early 1974, the drive for impeachment had picked up some powerful editorial support. The New York Times, Time, the Los Angeles Times, and the Wall Street Journal. The president went out to see those groups that still backed him. This is a real estate convention.
I'm not going to walk away till I get that job done.
More troubles piled up for the president as Internal Revenue took issue with his tax returns.
Let me just say this, and I want to say this to the television audience. I made my mistakes, but in all of my years of public life, I have never profited from public, and in all of my years of public life, I have never obstructed justice. And I think, too, that I can say that in my years of public life, that I welcome this kind of examination, because people have got to know whether or not their president is a crook. Well, I'm not a crook. I've earned everything I've got.
The public saw the president's moods fluctuating wildly as charges piled upon charges. The impeachment drive gained momentum, and Richard Nixon continued to protest, deny, and defend.
I condemn any attempts to cover up in this case, no matter who is involved.
We must maintain the integrity of the White House. And that integrity must be real, not transparent. There can be no whitewash at the White House.
What really hurts in matters of this sort is not the fact that they occur, because overzealous people in campaigns do things that are wrong. What really hurts is if you try to cover it up. If I were to make public these tapes, containing as they do blunt and candid remarks on many different subjects, the confidentiality of the office of the President would always be suspect from now on. Those are matters in which the President has a responsibility to defend this office, which I shall continue to do. I am not going to do anything, and I am not going to give up to any demand that I believe would weaken the presidency of the United States. I will not participate in the destruction of the office of the President of the United States while I am in this office.
Richard Nixon had come to equate giving up the tapes with the destruction of the presidency, but the courts ordered him to turn the tapes over to the impeachment committee. He refused. Then he made a dramatic move that he claimed would tell all his way. Instead of turning over the tapes, he made public edited transcripts, 1,254 pages of Oval Office recordings that had been edited by the White House.
I want there to be no question remaining about the fact that the President has nothing to hide in this matter.
But the public reaction was not what he had expected. People were appalled with the coarse language, anti-Semitism, and vulgar exchanges in the Oval Office of the President of the United States. Many believed that the transcripts further implicated Mr. Nixon in the cover-up. And when the President wanted to get away from it all, he could always make a state visit. In June 1974, President Nixon visited Egypt. Though he got a tumultuous welcome there, the President often seemed lost in his own thoughts. And when he came back, impeachment hearings were already underway.
Of course, the crime of perjury is a serious crime. And of course, the crime of obstruction of justice is a serious crime and would be an impeachable offense. And I do not expect that the House committee will find that the President is guilty of any of these crimes to which you have referred.